What if the biggest thing holding you back isn't out there in the world, but living quietly inside your own mind? You might think you're free, but what if you've been trapped in the same day over and over without even knowing it? Your past isn't just behind you, it's running your life right now. Most people don't realize they are living inside a prison without walls, without bars, without a physical lock. It's a prison built entirely in the mind. And the most dangerous thing about it is that it's invisible. You can wake up in the morning, go to work, interact with people, laugh at jokes, scroll on your phone, and yet still be trapped. You can appear free to the outside world, but deep inside, your life is being directed by something you can't quite see, a loop, a pattern, a repeated emotional state that you've been rehearsing for so long it has become the background of your reality. This prison is not made of steel, it's made of thoughts that are recycled, not created, thoughts that are echoes from yesterday, the day before, and years before that. And here's the truth that most people don't want to face. Those thoughts aren't just floating in your head. They are shaping your emotions, your decisions, and ultimately your life. We like to think that we are thinking new thoughts every day, but neuroscience shows that a staggering percentage of the thoughts we think today are the exact same as the ones we thought yesterday. We are living in mental déjà vu, and that's exactly how the prison holds us. But it doesn't stop at thoughts. Thoughts trigger feelings, and feelings reinforce thoughts. It's a feedback loop so powerful that after a while, you don't even have to consciously think a thought for the feeling to arise. Wake up and immediately remember that argument you had months ago. Feel a wave of anxiety before you even check your messages. That's your prison working exactly as designed. The mind cues the body, and the body cues the mind. They're in perfect sync, not for your liberation, but for your confinement. It starts subtly. Maybe years ago something happened. A betrayal, a failure, a rejection. You felt hurt. You thought about it. You talked about it. You replayed it in your mind over and over. Without realizing it, you were not only thinking about the past, you were reliving it. The body doesn't know the difference between an actual experience and the memory of that experience when the emotion is strong enough. So every time you replayed that moment, your body was producing the same chemical cocktail as if it were happening again, wiring that reaction deeper into your biology. This is where the prison starts to take a more solid form. Those repeated emotional reactions become familiar, and the familiar becomes comfortable, even if it's painful. You wake up in the morning and your body, conditioned by years of rehearsal, automatically signals your brain to think thoughts that match that emotional state. If you've been living in resentment, you wake up scanning your life for reasons to be resentful. If you've been living in fear, you wake up searching for danger. You're not looking at the world as it is. You're looking at it through the lens of your past. And the worst part, you believe this is just who you are. You say, I'm just a stressed person, or I've always had a short temper, or I'm not the kind of person who can be confident. But these aren't truths, they're conditions. They're habits of thought and emotion, and they've been running on autopilot for so long that they feel like your personality. You're not even aware that you've built a life that keeps reinforcing those emotional states, because the mind loves what's familiar, even if it's destructive. The invisible prison works by keeping you in survival mode. Survival mode is where the body thinks every day is a threat to manage. Every person is a potential danger, and every opportunity is a risk. In survival mode, the brain focuses on the past and the predictable future. It avoids the unknown. That means your brain will keep you locked in patterns that feel safe, even when they are slowly destroying your happiness, your health, and your potential. Think about it. If you keep waking up and rehearsing the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, making the same decisions, and experiencing the same outcomes, then you are not really living life, you are reliving it. Day after day, You're replaying a personal movie that's already been filmed, edited, and played 1,000 times. The script doesn't change, the ending doesn't change, and yet you keep showing up for the same performance. This prison doesn't come with warning signs. It's not loud, it's quiet, it's sneaky. It convinces you that the familiar discomfort is better than the unfamiliar possibility. It convinces you that stepping out into the unknown is dangerous. It whispers that you can't change, that you're too old, too damaged, too stuck, and because you believe those whispers, you never test them. You never try the door to see if it's actually locked. But here's the reality. Most of the bars of this prison exist only in your mind. They're made of beliefs you never questioned. Stories you told yourself for so long you forgot they were just stories, and emotions you've allowed to define you. And as long as you keep identifying with them, the prison stays strong. The most self-destructive habit is not a single action or vice. It's the unconscious commitment to staying the same. It's the decision you didn't know you were making every day when you let yesterday's emotions dictate today's reality. It's waking up in the same emotional state, wearing it like a uniform, and then wondering why life never changes. And yet, the prison will always feel real until you become aware that it exists, because awareness is the first crack in the wall. Without awareness, you keep rehearsing the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, and proving to yourself that life is just the way it is. Without awareness, you mistake your memories for your identity and your emotional past for your inevitable future. And without awareness, you keep handing over the keys to the very habit that is holding you hostage. There is a point where the body stops simply responding to the mind and starts running the show entirely. Most people believe their mind is in control of their life, that their thoughts shape their reality, and while that is true to a degree, the deeper truth is that over time the body can actually become the mind. This means the body begins to think, feel, and react without the conscious involvement of your brain. It operates on memory, on habit, on deeply ingrained emotional patterns that have been rehearsed so often they no longer require deliberate thought. It starts with repetition. You think a thought, that thought produces a chemical in the brain, and that chemical triggers a feeling in the body. That feeling becomes familiar, and because the mind and body are in constant communication, the body begins to signal the brain to produce more thoughts that match the feeling. For example, you have a stressful thought about work, which creates tension in your body. The body interprets this tension as a cue for stress, and it sends a signal back to your brain saying, "We are stressed." The brain then obliges by producing more stress-related thoughts, which keep the cycle alive. Eventually, the body doesn't even need the initial thought. The feeling has been stored like a program, and the body can run it without any mental prompt. At this stage, you can wake up, and before you even open your eyes, your body remembers the feeling you've been living in, whether it's anxiety, sadness, resentment, or guilt. That feeling triggers the brain to recall situations and events that justify the emotion. You might find yourself lying in bed thinking about a problem from months ago or anticipating something going wrong today, and you don't realize that it wasn't your conscious mind that started the process. It was your body. The body becoming the mind is like handing over the steering wheel of your life to a driver who only knows one route. No matter how much you say you want to go somewhere new, the driver keeps taking you back to the same familiar places because that's what it knows. And because those places are familiar, you confuse them for home. This is why breaking old patterns is so hard. You are not just trying to change your thoughts. You are trying to recondition an entire physical system that has memorized your old emotional states. If you've been living in fear for years, Your body has learned to produce the exact chemical environment of fear on cue. If you've been living in anger, your muscles, your posture, your facial expressions, and even your tone of voice have been shaped to match that state. It's not just in your head, it's in your cells, in your nervous system, in the very chemistry that sustains your daily existence. The science of habit formation tells us that neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you have the same thought and the same emotional reaction, you are strengthening the neural pathway that connects them. Over time, those pathways become like superhighways, vast, efficient, automatic. The more you travel them, the harder it is to take a different road. The body is like a creature of habit, always looking for the easiest, most familiar route, even if that route leads to pain. And here is where the real trap lies. When the body has become the mind, it resists change not because change is bad, but because change feels unfamiliar. The unknown is uncomfortable to a system that thrives on predictability. If you've been in stress for a decade, peace will feel wrong at first. If you've been in sadness for years, joy might feel unnatural. The body will actually crave the old emotional chemicals the way an addict craves a drug, because those chemicals have become the baseline for normal. This is why people can consciously decide to change, to break a bad habit, to think more positively, and yet find themselves slipping back into the same old patterns within days or weeks. The mind made a decision, but the body never got the memo. The body, still operating on its old programming, sends stronger and stronger signals to the brain to produce thoughts that match its familiar feelings. It might generate cravings, self-sabotaging impulses, or even physical symptoms to get what it wants. It's not that the body is working against you on purpose. It's simply doing what it's been trained to do. When you understand this dynamic, you can see why willpower alone rarely works. Willpower lives in the conscious mind, but the programming that runs most of your life lives in the subconscious mind and the conditioned body. It's like trying to control a stampede with a whisper. If you want real change, you have to go deeper than willpower. You have to teach your body to live in a new emotional state long enough for it to feel natural. But most people never get to that point because they underestimate how much of their day is run on autopilot. Studies show that a huge portion of our daily actions and reactions are unconscious. That means we are repeating the same behaviors, speaking the same words, and feeling the same emotions as yesterday, all without conscious input. The body is not just participating, it's leading. Imagine the body as a record player and your emotions as the grooves on the record. Every day you wake up and drop the needle in the same place and it plays the same song. You might wish for a different tune, but as long as you keep dropping the needle in that familiar groove, the song won't change. And when the body is the mind, the needle drops itself. This is the essence of how the most self-destructive habit forms, not in a single moment of weakness, but in the slow, steady training of the body to feel the same way every day until that feeling becomes your identity. When the body is in charge, you are no longer creating your future. You are recycling your past. Your biology becomes your biography, and your life is simply a reflection of the emotions you've memorized. The human brain is wired to seek what it knows. This is a survival mechanism, a way of keeping us safe from potential threats in the unknown. But what many people don't realize is that the brain's craving for familiarity doesn't discriminate between what's good for us and what's bad for us. It will cling just as tightly to harmful patterns as it will to helpful ones, because the only thing it's truly loyal to is predictability. And this is how we can become addicted to our own pain. It sounds almost absurd. Why would anyone want to stay in a state of suffering? But it isn't a conscious choice. Pain, when experienced repeatedly, becomes familiar, and familiarity to the brain feels safe. This is why someone who has lived in stress for years will unconsciously recreate stressful situations, or why a person who has carried resentment for decades will keep finding new reasons to be resentful. It's not that they enjoy the feeling, it's that their brain and body have adapted to it so completely that it has become their normal state. This adaptation is deeply rooted in chemistry. Every emotional state you experience comes with its own chemical profile. Joy, love, fear, anger. Each one releases a specific combination of neurotransmitters and hormones that bathe your cells in those signals. The more often you experience a certain emotion, the more your cells become accustomed to that chemical environment. Over time, they begin to expect it, just as an addict craves the substance that has hijacked their brain's reward system. Your body can crave the very chemicals produced by your emotional suffering. This is why the brain's addiction to familiar pain is so dangerous. It operates silently, beneath conscious awareness. You might think you're making choices based on logic or preference, but in reality, you may be driven by your body's desire to keep producing the emotions it knows best. A person who is addicted to stress may unconsciously procrastinate until they're forced into a high pressure situation, because that's when they feel the chemical rush their body has been conditioned to expect. Someone addicted to sadness might replay old losses or failures in their mind, not because they want to feel bad, but because their body is prompting their brain to produce the chemistry of sadness. The brain's loyalty to the familiar also means that it will resist the unknown, even when the unknown holds the promise of something better. If you've been living in anxiety for years, calm can feel strange, even unsafe. If you've been living in shame, self-acceptance can feel foreign and uncomfortable. Your nervous system interprets this unfamiliarity as a potential threat, and it tries to pull you back into the old emotional state where everything feels predictable. The mind will even create stories to justify this return to the familiar pain. You might have a peaceful day and suddenly find yourself worrying about something that isn't urgent or even real. That's your brain manufacturing a reason to re-enter the emotional state it's addicted to. Or you might feel joy for a brief moment, only to sabotage it with self-criticism or doubt. This isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that your brain and body are working exactly as they've been trained to. This addiction to familiar pain is often passed off as personality. People say, "That's just who I am. I'm a worrier. I'm not an optimistic person. I've always been hard on myself." But these aren't permanent traits. They are conditioned patterns. They are the result of your brain's long-term commitment to the emotional states you've most often experienced. If those states happen to be painful, then pain becomes your emotional home, and the longer you live in that home, the more it shapes your identity. You stop questioning whether there's another way to live because you've accepted the pain as normal. The brain reinforces this acceptance by filtering your perception of reality. You begin to notice more of what matches your familiar emotions and less of what contradicts them. If you're addicted to anger, you notice injustices everywhere. If you're addicted to fear, you see threats in every corner. Your brain becomes a master at finding evidence to keep you loyal to the state it knows best. This is why changing these patterns requires more than just thinking positive thoughts. You can't simply tell yourself to be happy if your body has been conditioned for years to produce the chemistry of sadness. You can't just declare yourself calm if your nervous system has been running on high alert for a decade. Your conscious mind might get excited about a new future, but your subconscious and your body are still tethered to the old one. The process of breaking the brain's addiction to familiar pain involves retraining both the mind and the body. It means repeatedly stepping into the unfamiliar emotional territory and staying there long enough for it to become comfortable. At first, your brain will resist. It will try to pull you back into the old patterns, and your body will send signals, urges, cravings, discomfort, that tempt you to return to the pain. But every time you refuse to indulge the old emotional state, you weaken its hold. The tricky part is that the brain will disguise its resistance in clever ways. It might make you feel tired, so you skip the new habit you're trying to build. It might distract you with small problems to keep you from focusing on big change. It might convince you that your new path is unrealistic, that you're not ready, or that you've already failed. All of these are just tactics to lure you back into the chemical comfort zone of your familiar pain. Recognizing this addiction for what it is, a biological and neurological habit, helps remove some of the shame that comes with it. You're not weak or incapable because you've struggled to change. You've simply been living in a state your brain and body have memorized. But just as they memorize the pain, they can memorize something. The challenge is in staying in that new state long enough for it to become the new familiar, the new safe, the new normal. The most self-destructive habit often hides in plain sight. It's the silent commitment to remaining the same person you were yesterday. It's the unconscious loyalty to your old self, even when that version of you no longer serves your highest good. And the reason this habit is so powerful is because it feels safe. You've rehearsed being that person for so long that it's become second nature. The problem is that nature isn't necessarily who you truly are. It's simply who you've practiced being. Breaking the habit of being your old self begins with awareness. You cannot change something you are unaware of, and most people are so deeply entangled in their patterns that they mistake them for their identity. They think, "This is just who I am," when in reality it's simply who they've been. Awareness is like turning on the light in a dark room. You suddenly see the shapes and patterns you've been stumbling over for years. You notice the moments when you slip into automatic reactions. You catch yourself replaying old mental tapes. You realize how often you dress in the same emotional wardrobe you've worn for decades. Fear, doubt, resentment, or insecurity. And you begin to see that those feelings are not permanent fixtures, but choices being made, often unconsciously. Once you become aware, the next step is the willingness to step into discomfort. This is where most people falter. The old self is familiar, and familiarity feels comfortable even if it's painful. The new self exists in the unknown, and the unknown feels threatening to the nervous system. You've built an entire inner world around the emotions and thoughts you know best, so stepping outside of them can trigger feelings of unease, uncertainty, or even fear. But that discomfort is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're breaking the pattern. The process of change requires you to do something very few people are willing to do. Think greater than you feel. This means refusing to let your current emotions dictate your choices, and instead using the vision of who you want to become as your compass. If your old self is addicted to stress, you must learn to act calmly even when your body is craving the rush of adrenaline. If your old self thrives on self-criticism, you must learn to speak to yourself with kindness even when the familiar voice of judgment tries to drown it out. You begin to override the program one choice at a time. Visualization becomes a powerful tool here, not as mere fantasy, but as mental rehearsal. Your brain doesn't know the difference between an actual event and a vividly imagined one, especially when emotion is involved. By repeatedly imagining yourself living as the new version of you, thinking differently, feeling differently, acting differently, you begin to lay down the neural pathways that make that version real. You're essentially teaching your brain to recognize a new normal before it physically happens. And when your brain starts to believe in that future, your body follows. However, the old self doesn't give up easily. The moment you start making changes, your brain and body will try to pull you back to the familiar. You may feel restless, anxious, or doubtful. You may be tempted to slip into old habits just once, telling yourself it's no big deal. This is where you must recognize that those impulses are not your true desires. They're withdrawal symptoms from the emotional states you've been addicted to. Just like breaking a physical addiction, you have to ride out the discomfort until the craving passes. In these moments, self-awareness and self-regulation are your greatest allies. You have to catch the old patterns as they arise and consciously choose not to act on them. This might mean pausing before reacting, breathing through an emotional trigger, or redirecting your attention toward the vision of who you are becoming. Each time you refuse to feed the old habit, you weaken it. Each time you align your actions with your new self, you strengthen that identity. It's also essential to change your environment where possible. Your surroundings can either reinforce your old self or support your new one. If certain people, places, or routines constantly trigger the emotions you're trying to leave behind, you must make intentional shifts. This doesn't always mean cutting people out of your life, but it may mean limiting your exposure to situations that pull you back into the past. Likewise, surrounding yourself with influences that inspire your growth, books, mentors, communities, helps reinforce the new patterns you're building. Consistency is key. Change is not about one big decision, but about a series of small, daily choices that, over time, add up to transformation. The brain rewires itself through repetition, and the body reconditions itself through sustained practice. That means you have to live as your new self long enough for it to stop feeling new. At first, it will require conscious effort. You'll have to remind yourself constantly, but eventually the thoughts, feelings, and actions of your new identity will become second nature. Patience plays a crucial role in this journey. Too many people quit because they don't see immediate results, not realizing that deep change is happening beneath the surface. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up the next day to see if it's growing. You water it, nurture it, and trust the process. The same applies here. Every time you choose the new self over the old, you're watering the seed of transformation, even if you can't yet see the full bloom. Perhaps the most empowering part of breaking the habit of being your old self is realizing that you are not bound by your past. Your history is not your destiny unless you allow it to be. You are not limited by who you've been because identity is not fixed, it's fluid. It is built from the thoughts you think, the emotions you feel, and the actions you take each day. The moment you decide to think, feel, and act in alignment with a greater vision of yourself, you begin to step out of the shadow of the old and into the possibility of the new. There comes a point when you must make a decision that is more powerful than your history. A decision to stop carrying the emotional weight of your past into your present. Living beyond the past is not about erasing memories or pretending certain events never happened. It's about refusing to allow yesterday's emotions to dictate today's actions and tomorrow's possibilities. It's about recognizing that every time you think and feel in the same way you did before, you are keeping yourself tethered to a life you say you want to outgrow. The past lives in us primarily through emotion. When something happens that leaves a strong emotional imprint, whether it's heartbreak, betrayal, failure, or loss, the brain takes a snapshot of that moment. It records every detail, what you saw, what you heard, how it felt in your body. That snapshot becomes wired into your neural architecture. And each time you revisit that memory, your body responds as though it's happening again, releasing the same chemical signals, reinforcing the same pathways. This is how the past continues to live in the present, not as a distant story, but as an active program running in your mind and body. When you live this way, your future is not created from vision, but from memory. You wake up, and before you've even had a chance to decide how you want to feel, your body has already cued your mind with the emotions it knows best. Those emotions pull your attention toward thoughts, people, and situations that match them. It becomes a self-reinforcing loop. You are not consciously creating your day. You are reliving a version of it that is modeled after what came before. Living beyond the past requires breaking that loop. It requires the courage to stop identifying so closely with your story that you forget you are the author, not just the character. People often defend their past like it's a badge of honor or a prison sentence they can't appeal. This is who I am because of what happened to me, they say, forgetting that who I am is a choice renewed every single day. The past may explain you, but it does not define you unless you allow it to. The challenge is that the past feels safe. Even when it's painful, it's predictable, and the unknown, even if it holds joy, freedom, or love, feels risky to a mind that has been trained to cling to certainty. This is why people repeat patterns they know are harmful, returning to the same types of relationships, the same self-sabotaging habits, the same limiting beliefs. It's not that they want the pain, it's that the pain feels familiar, and the unfamiliar feels threatening. To live beyond the past, you must begin to imagine and feel a future that is greater than what you have known. Not just think about it in vague terms, but immerse yourself in it until it becomes emotionally real to you. The mind doesn't create change through willpower alone. It creates change when the body experiences a new emotional state so deeply that it starts to believe it is living in a new reality. When you can generate the emotions of gratitude, joy, or empowerment without needing the external event to trigger them, you begin to teach your body that the future is not something to wait for. It's something to step into now. This is where mental rehearsal becomes more than a technique. It becomes a way of life. You wake up and intentionally decide who you are going to be today. You step into the emotional state of your desired future before you take a single action. You remind yourself that you are no longer the person who reacts to the world based on the pain of the past. Instead, you respond based on the vision of the person you are becoming. And every time you make a choice that aligns with that vision, you are living beyond the past. Of course, the past will try to reclaim you. Memories will surface, old triggers will appear, people will act in ways that tempt you to return to your former self. These moments are tests, not setbacks. They are opportunities to prove to yourself that you are no longer bound by the same emotional contracts you once upheld. Instead of reacting in the old way, you pause, you breathe, and you choose differently. Each time you do this, you weaken the pull of the past and strengthen your connection to your future. Living beyond the past also means shifting your relationship with uncertainty. The unknown is no longer something to fear, but a space of pure potential. In the past, you may have used predictability as a shield, believing that if you could control every outcome, you could protect yourself from pain. But control is an illusion, and the attempt to maintain it only keeps you replaying the same experiences. When you embrace uncertainty as the place where transformation happens, you stop trying to predict the future based on the past. Instead, you let the future be created by the choices you make in the present. This shift is not about ignoring what has happened to you. It's about integrating it without letting it lead you. You acknowledge the past as a chapter in your story, but you refuse to let it dictate the next one. You recognize that the emotions you've been carrying are not inevitable. They are patterns, and patterns can be broken. The moment you stop rehearsing the old you, you give space for a new you to emerge. That emergence doesn't happen in a single breakthrough. It happens in the accumulation of daily moments when you choose presence over memory, vision over habit, love over fear. Gradually, the emotional ties to the past loosen. The stories you once told yourself begin to feel less convincing. The identity you once clung to feels outdated, and without even realizing it, you start to live in alignment with a self that is not a reflection of what has been, but a creation of what can be. The most self-destructive habit isn't found in a single action, a bad decision, or a moment of weakness. It's found in the unconscious repetition of who we've always been. It's the invisible prison of our own thoughts and emotions, the way our body memorizes the past so deeply that it begins to live it before we even open our eyes in the morning. It's the brain's loyalty to familiar pain, the comfort it finds in what it knows, even when what it knows is hurting us. But within this understanding lies our freedom. The moment we see the prison, we realize it's not made of steel, it's made of patterns. And patterns can be broken. When we step into awareness, when we dare to feel emotions that belong to a future we haven't yet lived, when we choose to act as the person we want to become instead of the one we've been rehearsing for years, we begin to rewire both mind and body. Breaking the habit of being our old self is not easy. It demands that we walk into the unknown and stay there long enough for it to become our new home. It demands patience when the old triggers resurface, courage when our comfort zone calls us back, and persistence when change feels slow. But the reward is beyond measure, a life not dictated by yesterday, but created by conscious choice today. When you stop living from memory and start living from vision, you are no longer a prisoner of your past. You are the author of your future. And in that moment, the most self-destructive habit loses its power because you've replaced it with the most life-giving one, becoming who you were always meant to be.